Alright, welcome to Real Classic Film Reviews and welcome to a new Greatest Movie Year episode. So today we're going to look at 1982. A really interesting year for movies for a variety of reasons that we'll speak about over the next few minutes. Now, I'm not sure where this year sits in the accepted pantheon of greatest movie years, if it is considered a great year at all, but if it isn't, it should be. Now, this was, of course, the year of not only Steven Spielberg's E.T., but also Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, both movies that not only populate the greatest sci-fi lists, but also the greatest films ever made lists. But 1982 also featured dozens of other excellent films that have since gone on to earn that classic film status. So let's take a look. So 1982 was really a year of firsts. The first ever CD was pressed this year. The Commodore 64 home computer was launched. The first edition of USA Today was launched. The first episode of Late Night with David Letterman was broadcast. And back on this side of the pond, it was a little bit grim with Argentina invading the Falkland Islands that kick-started a 10-week conflict resulting in over 900 deaths. Elsewhere in England, the 20 pence coin was first put into circulation and us Brits were treated to a fourth television channel, imaginatively titled Channel 4. And I want to get the ball rolling here by mentioning a film that doesn't get enough press, and that's Venom. And no, not the Tom Hardy covered in black goo movies, but the film that stars Oliver Reed, Klaus Kinski, Nicole Williamson and Susan George, and Sterling Hayden. Now, it's a hostage thriller where everyone's plans go to hell because there's a killer black mamba on the loose. No, really, this is a real film, and it's great. Anything that puts Reed, Kinski and a deadly snake together couldn't fail to entertain.
The most dangerous snake in the whole world. That dangerous.
The snake is loose.
You'll have to turn over now. I'm not going to hurt you.
And while we're talking of killer critters, let's bring to light a little-known director named James Cameron, whose first feature-length movie was released in 1982. That is, of course, Piranha 2, The Spawning. Now, this has piranhas with wings in it, and that's all you need to know, really. Cameron's pretty much disowned it over the years, and it does sit awkwardly among his mega projects like Terminator 2, True Lies, Avatar, Titanic, etc. Now let's nicely segue from that into some other crazy sequels that were also released in 82. We got the long-awaited Death Wish sequel. We got the sequel No One Wanted in Grease 2, which has gone on to become a cult classic of sorts. Audiences were treated to the first of the Friday the 13th films to use the iconic hockey mask, the third instalment of the franchise. We got to see Rocky Balboa take on Mr. T in the third entry in the Rocky franchise, and that's still one of my favourite Rocky movies to this date. And we also got the trashy but fun Amityville 2, The Possession, and the divisive third Halloween film, Season of the Witch, a film, again, that's since gone on to be reappraised as a cult classic. However, 1982's most notable sequel is up there with the greatest sequels ever made. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is still considered the ultimate Star Trek movie, with Kirk going up against Ricardo Montalban's Khan Noonien Singh, a space nutter hell-bent on capturing the life-creating Genesis technology and destroying Kirk while he's at it. So The Wrath of Khan was one of several sci-fi summer blockbusters released in 1982. Now, the next handful of movies that I'm going to mention were all released in June alone that year. So, as well as the aforementioned Star Trek entry, Toby Hooper and Steven Spielberg collaborated on the feel-good tale of a house built on an Indian burial ground that released demonic spirits, kidnap a little girl, and possess household objects and toys like that god-awful clown. Now, only a week after that, we saw the release of Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extraterrestrial, the heartwarming and heartbreaking tale of a young boy finding friendship in the form of a small alien left behind on Earth. It's a personal favourite of mine, and I don't think I'm able to criticise it in any way. Its sense of childhood and childhood adventure never ages. The music's iconic. The way a little latex puppet can bring tears to grown adults is a testament, really, to Spielberg's genius. And the following week from that, audiences got to see Clint Eastwood steal a jet codenamed Firefox from those pesky Russians. A film that wants to be part James Bond and part Star Wars, but actually isn't either. But the final weekend in June of 82 saw the release of both Blade Runner and The Thing. Now, Blade Runner is about as seminal as sci-fi gets. So hot off the success of Alien, Ridley Scott took a Philip K. Dick story and fashioned a rain-soaked sci-fi film noir. A film so ahead of its time that the studio took control of it, resulting in subsequently about half dozen cuts of the film being available. Now, Ridley Scott's directing career has been all over the place, but here he made a movie so influential you can see its fingerprints on almost every sci-fi movie made since. And finally, John Carpenter's remake of The Thing from Another World, The Thing, arrived to so much negative reception from audiences and critics that Universal cancelled a multi-picture deal with the director. Suffice to say that that's gone on to be one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made. Its gory and gloopy special effects, that are still not for the faint of heart, were devised by the only 22-year-old Rob Bottin. Its sense of isolation, its fear of the unknown, its moments of extraordinary tension, and its ambiguous ending make sure it transcends cult classic. It's just a stone cold classic. And speaking of stone cold classics, 1982 gave us also the first Rambo movie, First Blood, in which Stallone's Special Forces soldier returns home from Vietnam to a frosty reception and soon ends up on the run across an unforgiving landscape. Of course, the series would go on to become an insane series of comic book style violence, but here it touches on serious themes of military politics, PTSD, and an America still reeling from defeat in a war it never really believed in. Now let's stick with Hollywood hardasses for just a few moments more, because this is also the year that an Austrian bodybuilder truly broke out onto the Hollywood stage. Arnold Schwarzenegger had dabbled in a few bit parts here and there, but here in John Milius's Conan the Barbarian was a part that was perfect for a 7-time Mr. Olympia winner. Now, the 80s were the decade for sauce and sorcery movies, certainly influenced in no small part by the success of the Star Wars films. And it was also the decade for Schwarzenegger, who dominated with films like this, The Terminator, Predator, Running Man, Commando, Twins, Red Heat. Now, speaking of debuts, we also got the fast-talking, smart-mouthed comedian Eddie Murphy arriving on the scene with Nick Nolte in Walter Hill's tough and eternally un-PC 48 Hours. Now, as I touched on in the intro, the Commodore 64 home computer was released in 1982. Now, the Atari had already been released in 1979, but gaming was about to move from the arcades into people's homes. And at the dawn of this new experience came a movie named Tron, the story of a computer hacker abducted into the digital world and forced to participate in games where its only chance of escape is with the help of a heroic security program. Now, Tron was a bleeding edge fusion of live action, animation and computer generated imagery. Now, the film was a dud at the time of release, and in all honesty, it's still not the greatest movie, but its place in film history is a very important one. Right, so let's clear our heads and have a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the other cinematic offerings from 1982. We had Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek starring in The Missing, which was based on the true story of American journalist Charles Horman, who disappeared during the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat. We also got John Huston's all-star musical Annie, based on the Broadway musical, which wasn't far off being Tim Curry's first Hollywood movie. We got Sidney Lumet's excellent courtroom drama The Verdict, starring Paul Newman and James Mason. And also Alan J. Pakula teamed up with Meryl Streep for the well-made but emotionally devastating Sophie's Choice. And of course, many, many more. You could go on, but which films haven't I mentioned? And what are your thoughts on 1982 as a great movie year? Is it the best movie year of the 80s? Let me know in the comments, and as always, happy viewing, stay safe, thanks for watching.
I'm telling you the law. Out here it's me. Don't push it. Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.